You know, it's saying something how long I've been doing the show for the past 10 years now that even the Pepsi logo has changed. So, apart from 10th anniversary festivities, what is my reasoning for making a Christmas review centered around the beginning of Skully reviews? Well, the first of which being the Christmas season is a very busy work season, the second being that I'm looking for an early lunch, and lastly, with the Yuletide season being as jovial as it is melancholy, I decided to dedicate this video to the small percentage of those interested in how this little review show got started. Not that it's a very interesting or long story to tell, let alone whether or not anybody else is truly interested, but hey, for those of you suffering the prolonged nattering of relatives or crushing loneliness, here I am to alleviate you of your boredom and loneliness with my origin story. To give at least something of a premise here, I'll mainly be focusing on the creation of Skully reviews up until the third season in 2017, which was arguably where the show peaked in terms of both my enthusiasm and viewership. Well, relatively speaking, of course. So in terms of development history, God, it feels weird saying that when you're reviewing yourself. 15-year-old Solidus-Skully, young and lanky lad that he was, had binge-watched many an internet reviewer of his time, from the likes of VIII, Filmbrain, Linkara, and of course Gexop. And being impressionable, some might say foolish, I figured, wow, sounds like fun, I want to do that too! Oh no wait, sorry, this is early 2010 Skully. Here, let me fix that for you. Wow, that sounds like fun. I want to do this too. God, what a fucking piece of shit. As a bit of a fun fact, even though I had an account on YouTube since 2010 when I was 13, initially these reviews weren't gonna be on YouTube at all. In fact, the genesis of the Solidus-Skully project was spurred on by Gexop's move from YouTube to his own website, itstailtime.net, where a much smaller pool of creators hosted not only Gexop, but also the likes of Zookstar1000, Amuya, and many of his friends and alumni. My idea was that if I could somehow get my content posted there, I might be able to foster some sort of loyal viewership, and since these were people that I watched and had been doing this sort of thing for a while now, I could get a few tips and pointers on how to make my videos the best they could possibly be. Now, this might sound strange to a lot of people who've grown up in a generation where YouTube pretty much dominated the videoscape universe, so to speak, but believe it or not, there was a time, back in the late 2000s and early 2010s, where there were multiple video hosting sites that tended to have their own market share of the platform. It might seem archaic nowadays, but aggregate websites like Screw Attack or That Guy with the Glasses were prime hotspots for newcomers to not only get their hat in the ring, but also foster some tightly knit viewership that did lend itself to varying degrees of success. Granted, not everybody would be a knockout nostalgia critic or angry video game nerd success story, but at least a moderately popular VIII or Linkara that still have a following to this day. Anyway, this plan of mine did eventually fizzle out somewhat with the revelation that as someone who wanted to become an internet reviewer, I was stumped by two major issues. The first of which being that I had no idea what form of media I wanted to review to begin with, and the second being that I had no idea how to create videos like these whatsoever. And so the rest of my 2012-2013 was spent researching and watching videos like this to better look at how to structure the reviews of the angry internet reviewer shtick and see how they were made. You know, blow-by-blow commentary, live-action reaction shots, insert crude joke, insular reference that only a handful of people would actually get, let alone find funny. A zombie fisherman! Bear in mind, the whole video essay and Patreon content creation thingo was still a few years away, and in the interim where internet reviews were either wacky gay man pretends he's a cartoon character in real life, or the dying embers of AVGN ripoff clones. He is the game dude, he is so rude, he is a gamer with a bad attitude. This was pretty much the go-to standard before people just blankly talked over gameplay footage or their VTuber furry avatar without much presentation or style, as internet videos gradually derived less inspiration from film and television, as was the case in years past. On the one hand, your first time doing something is going to suck, and you are going to suck harder than a hooker moonlighting as a Dyson vacuum cleaner. But the day I posted the Sonic Lost World video in late 2013, poorly made as it was, did give me enough experience to work around and figure things out gradually over the course of time. So, why did I talk about Sonic Lost World despite that game being complete and utter shite? I have no idea apart from the video's subject matter, which I honestly think was because it was about the closest thing that I really had to the most knowledge that I could really talk about it with some semblance of authority at the time. It's here where we finally get to what I've retroactively titled the pilot episodes, where the show briefly went under the moniker of Skully X, something that I planned on using as a sort of anime-sounding cool buzzword for different review subjects. You know, something like Skully X Resident Evil in a sort of Hunter x Hunter sort of way. But that didn't pan out as well as I'd hoped. But what the X series served to do is pretty much be there for me to experiment with format and see what worked and what didn't to gain enough experience so that the first official season would come across much smoother than what most shows usually deal with when they first get off the ground. Which is very much true, because whether writing fiction or stuff even like a review show, if you want to be good, you need to write the absolute fucking crap out of it and keep working on it before you start getting to the good stuff. Not that I really follow that advice very well, because my first official review that I plan to unveil as early as New Year's 2013 was a scathing review of Sonic Heroes after a recent playthrough where I plan to give that game the lambasting it deserves. It even got down to the scripting process, but a mixture of cold feet and frustration pretty early on left me wanting to save that until I gained enough experience to better illustrate my points. And let me tell you, it'll definitely be a review 12 years in the making. So, with Sonic Heroes out, I dived in without any script, making my first official review on Metallica's Saint Anger. And boy does it fucking show, because apart from my improvisational skills being poor, there were also tons of ill thought out ideas and concepts that I excised in the months since. Although it's funny, for as much as I dislike these early reviews, the one review that I actually remain relatively the same on in terms of my thoughts is Metallica's Saint Anger. I mean, the songs on the album are decent, but run for far too long and outstay their welcome. The snare drum is only really a pain on songs like Saint Anger itself, where it's clear that a post-Black album Lars Ulrich can't exactly thrash the drums with the best of them like he used to without needless fills to cover lethargic skills. This isn't going to be a review update for any past videos, to be clear, but it does illustrate my points here. Anyway, the points universal across all these early videos that I do want to discuss are some early concepts that didn't pan out, namely who exactly the Skully was compared to my real self. Circa 2012-2013, I was a massive loner with a lot of anger issues and a very introverted personality, and to that effect, was also very camera shy. Which is why one idea that I did have would be to present the character as this sort of 90s host kind of way with exaggerated movements and radical slang dude to venerate personality where I had none. The problem was that I also wanted this character to present my real opinion, and as such would conflict with the whole upbeat, dude, this game is totally sick, man, without nuance or subtlety that I did appreciate about stuff like Silent Hill or Sonic or whatever. So in the early years especially, it was very awkward to see this quiet, gangly looking bastard try to act larger than life. Another issue in the early seasons was also the idea of having a co-host, which I'd use to try and present differing arguments and opinions about the games and movies to further create intrigue about the discourse, and my way of handling it was to create it out of stock photos of Lars Ulrich with text next to them. This probably confuses anybody who wasn't me back around that time period, but Lars Ulrich was this bizarre little goblin man who I just found utterly memorable and hilarious, which, given his 2000s era output, wasn't exactly unexpected.
He fucking left the band!
But the problem was, it was such an inside joke that only I would find funny that I never considered the audiences that didn't know about Metallica who would even know about this, much less care about it. It wasn't until much later, as in Season 2 era of Skully reviews, that I came to realize that references and inside jokes aren't universal, and unless you've got a really good running gag, try your best not to make it about gags beyond the source material that you're reviewing. Asian guy.
We'll meet again, Asian guy. I'll show you to just suddenly appear for a few seconds, jump onto the ceiling, then walk out as if nothing ever happened. Just you wait.
Then we also have the idea of the Metallica snob, which, again, inside joke about how insular the fanbase is, and still somewhat is in regards to the band's post-and Justice for All output, disregarding albums from the Black Album through Saint Anger, which was just meant to be a villain character that never panned out. Also, I think a bizarre piss take on the cinema snob, for some reason, and the episodes that ranged in the X series were a brief rip-off of the Nostalgia Critics Radar or the Story Arc thing, which I used for the Sonic Underground video, to an unfinished album review of Silverchair's Frog Stomp, an album that was heavily copyright-stricken and now no longer exists. Yeah, it wasn't really until the end of The Matrix and 2002 Resident Evil movie reviews where I finally felt like things started to resemble what I'd set out to do. But even in that case, we still got issues. Putting aside the audio balancing, video bleeding, and a voice more monotone than most early 2000s text-to-speech synthesizers, it's clear that these early videos I'm desperately trying to imitate my inspirations and failing spectacularly. Particularly the dry sarcasm and wit of Phaelus that requires something that just can't be taught, especially with the lines that otherwise would have been funnier had the delivery been more energetic and the timing been better. Not to mention, the jokes of a lot of these early videos tend to rely more on randomness as opposed to contextual gags with setups and payoffs. In this case, it's literally, I said Matrix Mobile, therefore Batman theme. Tee-hee, funny man. Long story short, after a lengthy period of trial and error, by mid-2014, I'd found my footing and decided to kick Skully reviews off good and proper by jumping from one Resident Evil project to the next with the review of the original 1996 game. Seemed fitting, and despite its rough around the edges quality, it's still a review that I hold some degree of fondness for. I suppose maybe the game's rough around the edges quality, combined with how I still had a ways to go, left me feeling like for both myself and the subject matter, we were both on equal footing. While there are still some hallmarks of characters say a thing and I insert references in place of jokes, even as early as this review, I think I did finally start to get to grips with balancing critique and humor in regards to pacing. Although that Mortal Kombat joke probably would have worked a bit better if I used the theme from the games, as opposed to White Zombie, which some people might construe for me referencing Way of the Warrior.
End it.
But from there we jump from pace to pace, with Sonic 3D Blast, Ghost Rider, Neversoft Spider-Man, followed by Australian PSAs and Silent Hill. And while these videos aren't up there in terms of my favourites videos ever made, let alone even passing a quality benchmark, there is a certain level of enthusiasm that does give Skully Review's first season a certain nostalgic quality for days long since past. I suppose for me it's particularly because it focuses on games I played in my youth and had extensive knowledge on, with both Spider-Man or Ghost Rider specifically. Granted, had I been reviewing all these games nowadays, I'd focus on talking more about the game's mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics beyond their base level, but by first season standards, and by very late standards at the time, it was about the amount of depth that people generally expected out of internet reviews. If there was any weak link in one video that I absolutely despised to the point where I went out of my way to remake it for the 10th anniversary season, that would be Gex. I mean, I already covered this in the remake review, so I won't waste my time, but to reiterate, I have no idea what the fuck happened here or why it turned out the way that it did. Granted, the critique aspect had about the depth of a puddle in terms of talking about the game's base mechanics, and there were some really shitty jokes chucked in there, but inexcusable is the editing where still images just seem to glitch out, which I still have no explanation for, but should have caught after I exported it and re-edited it from scratch, or tried to see if there was a way to fix it. And I suppose in that aspect, Season 1, like most Season 1s, is very rough around the edges, and apart from a glimpse into amateur YouTube video making days gone by, it's probably something not worth anybody's time, really. Season 2, starting in 2016, starts off comparatively strong, with The Matrix Path of Neo being a game that I love, reference constantly, and continue to weave throughout the show to this day. This is very much the turning point which solidified the show's direction. I mean, for one thing, my on-camera performance gained confidence. The 90s dude lingo, while still present, does gradually soften, and I finally learned to speak like an actual human being. And finally, the story, gameplay, and technical aspects trifecta was born. And one thing I never really noticed until looking back, that unlike the recent seasons of the show, I noticed that 19-year-old Solidus-Skully put a shitload more effort into the staging and cinematography aspects of these videos. It's not often that I'm willing to compliment my own skills, but given the horror threshold binding these episodes together with the constant deaths, the atmosphere came across a lot better than I remembered. Of course, in terms of direct storytelling, it was a token mystery box plotting arc that I gradually dropped, but I can't help but love the way I staged some of these early videos, like the Wrath of Cortex review, which opened on a cloud of time-lapse of Silent Hill 1 soundtrack, which created a very offbeat feel for the intro. If nothing else, Season 2 of Skully Reviews was where I found my stride, my passion for what I was doing, and doubled so from here on out, so it was all systems. Full power! It's a season where, despite the overall quality being nowhere near the standards of most videos coming out in 2016, the passion here still remains twice as vibrant. Though a lot of that probably had to do with how enthralled I was by the subject matter that I was covering. Assassin's Creed 1 and how a recent playthrough made me appreciate the story and characterization more than I ever did before, giving DMC Devil May Cry a more nuanced review than you would have seen in a pre-DMC 5 world, where the vitriol was much stronger against it as the then current game, as opposed to a weird one-off experiment that it's seen as nowadays. Also, taking a look at some fun games that that I felt never really got coverage, like Jackie Chan's Stuntmaster, Destroy All Humans, and the original Metal Gear. Honestly, the only real letdown episode of the season, which bizarrely turned out to be a blessing in disguise, is the lost episode of the Cable Guy review, which was more play funny clips from the movie and then I react to it with little critique nor comedy of my own. I do still have the full episode for those of you who are curious, but really the full review, you're not missing much, and in my eyes, the cut down version you did get in 2016 was for the best. However, the two biggest reviews of 2016 that I am still proud of is Silent Hill and Halloween Resurrection. Silent Hill and how I finally felt like I hit the right balance between critique and comedy, as well as giving my own thoughts and passions about the franchise while also doing my best to introduce it to newcomers who never played the series before. And of course Halloween Resurrection, simply because I think in terms of pacing and comedy, it's one of my strongest videos because of just how much fun I had making it, but also how much material the movie itself gave me to work with. Season 2 started strongly and ended as such, and that energy carried right on into Season 3. Which started off big with the classic Sonic reviews, which for a bit of history was intense but well worth it. Namely that I gave myself a very tight deadline to finish these reviews, and I remember vividly how I rushed home from work on that February night desperately editing the Sonic & Knuckles review in a panic just trying to get it done and uploaded, which cost me more than a few mental health points trying to calm myself down on the aftermath. Don't get it twisted, because the classic Sonic reviews were still quite fun, particularly with the whole 90s grunge gimmick that I had with the first review. It made these videos a lot of fun to film and enjoyable to see others get a kick out of them. I suppose also aiding Season 3's enjoyment factor, for me anyway, was that it aped so much of the same beats of Season 2, but with games I not only had experience with, but a solidified approach to how I reviewed them, and therefore all that was left was to sharpen my critiquing skills. Granted, it was still shy of my post-Season 4 ethic of going further in depth into the game mechanics and dynamics alongside the story and technical aspects, but Season 3 definitely bridged the gap and hits the sweet spot between being fun and informative. It's difficult to pin down some of my favourites of Season 3, but personal highlights include Uncharted Drake's Fortune for its pacing and comedy, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake for shedding light on a very underappreciated title for absolutely everything that the Metal Gear series owes to its story and gameplay blueprints for years to come, Call of Duty Black Ops for being a game that most wouldn't have expected to see on the channel, but one I wanted to show some love and appreciation for, much like how I first experienced the game back in the day. Demonic Toys was a fun romp through horror movie memory lane, although literally the day after I filmed that review I caught a cold, so that sucks. Honestly, the only review that I don't like from this season was of the 2005 Doom movie review, and as I brought up back then, that's just because it was significantly cut down and abridged from what was originally intended. Of course, it doesn't help matters that the movie pivots from being entertaining and interesting to boring on a scene-by-scene basis, but I do wish I could have given it a bit more of a thorough look-through. Still, brevity is the soul of wit, and I suppose counterintuitive to the 5-hour video reviews or whatever content we see these days, don't say in 5 hours what could adequately be explained in 20 minutes. And in keeping with the theme of older episodes of Skully reviews averaging out to about the 20-minute mark, what are my final thoughts on Skully reviews from its origins up until the 3rd season? In summary, and god it feels weird to judge your own work like you're not even the same person, but if I wasn't myself when I watched these videos, the passion for what I was making is definitely there, but there are some rough hurdles that others just might not be able to jump into in order to enjoy these videos for what they are. The audio balancing can be quite shit at times, especially in Season 3 where it seems to be peaking a lot of the time. The humour will either land on occasion or fall flat on its task from video to video, and the effort to be a jack of all trades in both critique and comedy in Skully reviews may wind up being a master of none. All for none, and mediocrity for all. So on that note, I'm Solidus-Skully, keep it new metal, and have a very Merry Christmas.